Okay, James, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. As you know, you're someone I've admired for a long time. Seen you speak a few times as well, and I can't wait for the audience to learn from all the wisdom that you have to bring today. The first thing I want to say is congratulations. You have a baby due tomorrow, is what I understand, right? That's exciting.
Yep.
And the first one. So tell me how you feel about that. And thank you for taking the time away from, that and being with your wife to be here with us.
Yeah, and Derek, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure, and it's always fantastic to connect with you. Yeah, it's an adventure. Yeah, I didn't really think I'd ever become a parent. I found my wife digitally through the dating
Ah,
apps and lots of overlapping worlds through the University of Michigan, where we both went to school. And yeah, as time has gone by, it's kind of a weird indicator that I found early on about us and our relationship is that I've been able to realize something like four of my five lifelong dreams because of my wife.
oh,
It's true. And one of her lifelong, or she had a few that we've been able to accomplish for her too. But one of hers was to become a mom for the first time. So
that's
it's been a
beautiful.
lot of fun, and it's something that's an adventure. We're just starting.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. But it's an amazing adventure. I've been down the road a few times, and at every phase, it's this new beautiful thing. Whether they're infants or they're starting to walk, and adolescence, teenagehood is as scary as having a daughter or a son. And at the teenagehood, it sounds like, but it's fun at the end of the day. And I'm sure you'll be a great dad, and I'm sure she'll be a great mom. But question. So you four out of the five. What's the missing one? What's missing? What goal hasn't been accomplished?
It's basically just travel around the world
Copy. All right.
nonstop, but buy one of those open-ended tickets and just go. Just
Right.
whenever I feel like going to a
One
new
way
place,
ticket.
go.
Yep.
Yeah, one way going west, right?
I like that. Very good. Well, congratulations on that. And we were talking offline. You shared some personal stuff, and I want to go unpack your journey a little bit to get to know you, and for the audience to get to know you a little closer. And here on the show, if you've listened, and for those that are listening, I always try to go off the beaten path a little bit to get to know our guests and understand, kind of where they're coming from. You shared with me that you unfortunately lost your mom about 2 weeks ago, 5 years ago. Is that right?
5 years and 2 weeks ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
two
So
years
almost
was
an
the anniversary.
anniversary that
Yeah.
corresponds with the birth of your first one. So tell me about how your mom impacted your career and what it's like having your first child and her not being here.
Well, I'll even go before my career. My mom was a housewife. She never had a formal higher education. We used to joke that the only time she went to college was to drop me off or pick me up.
There you go.
But she was probably one of the most brilliant human beings you ever met in your life. She was a first class stewardess for Pan Am Airlines.
Wow.
Her father was a Royal Air Force pilot and one of the chief pilots for British, which is now British Airways. And having a post World War II mother, she brought a perspective, a mentality, a culture to our family, let alone me, that I still tap into today. Um, she would give me advice, and I hate the fact that even years later after she's died, she's still
In your
freaking
head.
right
Yeah.
all the time, and I can hear her going, see.
Yeah. And you're going to be
Um,
repeating those words very soon, I'm sure.
I look forward to it. I look
Yeah.
forward to being an annoying father. Um, but no, she gave me these big chunks of advice that weren't very specific to one certain topic, one certain subject, but were really helpful in big categories of subjects. And when it comes down to your career path, I used to joke with her that I always wanted to run away from people interviewing me. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm like, I don't know. I can't predict the future. Like, I couldn't have predicted 5 years ago I'd be where I am today, or with my wife about to have a baby, or living in Texas. Shit.
Mm.
Um, but she goes, one day at a time, always try to put yourself into an advantage to be progressive, to be set up for the next step. Or one of her less favorite lines was, luck favors the prepared, sort of thing.
Agree 100%.
Um, but she also, put some things on me as a parent, which is funny because it's now going to be more relevant than ever before, but it translated into my career path and eventually people leadership.
Right.
She was raised in a very strict post World War II home, military home, where even when I was 15 years old, she would go back and visit her parents in England. She would have a curfew. And you're like, really?
Interesting.
Yeah. So she would always
So
recommend,
grandpa was putting on the curfew on your mom when she go back to visit. Wow.
I mean, well into her 50s and
Wow.
60s almost, right? Um, but one of
Right.
the things that stuck with me early on was that she goes, I always wanted to be the parent I never had.
Mhm.
So when I turned 16, she gave me keys to the car, a gas card, no curfew, a 12 pack of beer. She worked in the counseling office, so she knew
Your
where all the
mom is
parties
the
were.
best, dude.
Oh, it got better. She let my girlfriend sleep over. She gave me and my friends boxes of condoms. I'm like, what are we gonna do with this? Mom, this is so weird.
She went
Um,
far left.
yeah, yeah, she was the cool, but she knew that she spoke to me about it once, and
Okay.
this is another big key that I've held with me as well. Is her philosophy was you give your kid or you give your team members all of the freedom and responsibility in the world, and if they violate it, you take it away.
Hmm.
So I was a good kid. I never missed curfew. Well, I didn't have
Right.
curfew, so but I never screwed up. I never got a speeding ticket. I never, did DUI. I always was make sure I was the designated driver or whatever it was back in the
Right.
day. But it became like I think that one of the foundations of
You didn't want to screw
seemingly
up that
becoming.
freedom. I
Yeah.
always look at it that way. Father was in the military, Air Force. He was an MP in the Air Force.
Wow.
Similar thing where, very strict household when I lived with him. And yeah, but at the end of the day, it's those things that kind of prepare us to be better at the end of the day, I think. But when I did get the freedom from him, I never wanted to screw it up. So I was always mindful of it. If there was a certain curfew or whatnot, if you could just maintain that, then, I could keep getting my little bit of freedom. I knew if the minute I didn't check in, the minute I wasn't back at the
Yeah.
right time or whatever,
Yeah.
yeah, same thing. A few times I was out, probably had too much to drink. I guess even though he was a strict dad, I could call him and he'd pick me up, and that earned respect in itself from him.
Yeah.
So,
That's
can
great.
relate a little bit there, but that's it's an interesting time, right? You're having your first one. Mom isn't around. It sounds like she influenced you a lot, and you were pretty close. So,
Mhm.
I think at least she's instilled those lessons that you'll be able to taking into your parenthood, I would imagine. But
Yeah, I think
congratulations
I
on that.
think thank you. I think, regardless of your points of view of religion or beliefs, and I
Right.
respect all of them. I'll never discount anybody's beliefs. Regardless of what happens, where you are, what you experience is, when you lose someone in like kind of that inner circle, your top five or whatever,
Yeah.
she was number one at the time. You walk away with parts of them, and that parts of them that you never had before, and you apply it to everything you're doing in your life. So,
Right.
um, becoming a father without my mother around is, we've had some tearful nights. It's been tough. I even had my godmother sent me a grandma basket, which is like the basket you leave at
Yeah.
your in-laws or your parents' house, so you don't have to schlep all your gear over there.
Right.
I have nowhere to put the basket, right? So it's kind of like, cool, you know.
But you have
So
it, it's
I have it.
yeah, you have it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
your wife's family, are they around?
No, I mean, both of us are over 1,000 miles away from the closest family member. So, Illinois, Salt Lake City, for me, San Francisco, a little
Right.
bit in Hawaii.
Right.
Um,
Sausalito area. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Well, good luck. It's the two of you
Thank you.
making it happen. And I know it's an exciting time. So, as you tread forward, one day at a time, have fun with it. And that's the number one rule. Just don't forget to have fun. It's stressful and it's difficult. It might get at times. Just keep making it fun, whatever it is.
Yeah,
That's my
I
advice, at
agree.
least.
Thanks.
Let's talk about some more lessons that you've taken away in your career. Now, your first stop early in your career was a company that some of us might know, a little small company called SuccessFactors, acquired by SAP. Now, you were there during the acquisition, I believe, right? So you were
Yep.
at SAP and then acquired by SuccessFactors. Is that kind of how that played out for you, or
Other
opposite?
way around.
You were
Yeah.
at SAP and they acquired SuccessFactors.
I was at SuccessFactors and
That's
we
what I
got
thought. Okay,
acquired by SAP.
cool.
There you
So you got
go.
acquired. You
Yep.
you were acquired. So what was your position at the time when you were acquired, and what was that like, kind of selling through that acquisition?
So I was actually there pre-IPO, IPO, downturn of the market, and then the acquisition as well. So it was a roller coaster. So I started off as an SDR.
Right. I saw that.
Went
Mhm.
graduated into enterprise field sales for a year in 2008. 2008 was always, no matter where you went, you're always going to find that, rough time that
Right.
somebody, team or company had during that time. So I
Not
was
my
offered
story, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah. And I was offered my job back as an SDR. So I was an SDR twice, not just once.
Yeah.
So for about 2.5 years formally as an SDR, and then a year as a prospecting sales rep as well. So I like to say I was an SDR through that time too. So when SAP came along to acquire us, I was running the sales development department pretty much globally.
Okay.
We had about I think 40 people by then,
Oh.
maybe a little bit more, but we were growing, and I think we got to about almost 70 by the time I left.
So going through the acquisition, I know I went through one that was a pretty big one as well, and we had to run 2 Salesforce instances for like a year. It took a legit a year for the 2 companies to finally become one. In some cases, it took longer, depending on what operational limitations are happening. But as a leader at the time, it was interesting. You had people who were worried about their job, were being acquired, are they going to get rid of everybody? And so you're trying to manage expectations that way and keep people productive. We have a whole new set of products that we had to sell. We weren't just selling the handful that we were already had been trained to sell, but now we needed to sell this bigger bucket of products. We had been acquired by Dell. So, there was all this new stuff. And so I'm curious, like when you went through that process, what was that like for you and your team to manage through that? I would imagine that it was some bumpy road, the acquisition, the downturn, all these inflection points. How did you remain successful through those distractions?
So we didn't, and it's always kind of not a scary, but kind of like the fear of the unknown or fear of what's about to come when you have that kind of reality.
You see things happening, but you don't have all the information, right? Because
or you hear things, or it's going on that side of the fence. Does that mean it's going to come on this side of the fence? So SAP was actually a really respectful company and leadership team. And they really didn't do a thing the first year. It was just more of like, I'm speculating and having conversations after the fact, but it was more along the lines of planning and how do we integrate? Do we keep it separate? Do we just open up the bag of available, subject matter experts, let alone products? So for us and the SDR team, I mean, at least I created the reality for my team, or tried to create the reality for my team, that nothing was changing. Same goals, same targets, a little bit more formal when it comes to like comp plans and reporting. We didn't change CRMs, thankfully, because we did that once before and it was a mess. Don't want to do that again. But no, for the most, for me personally, it was actually a really great experience because SAP started coming along and they found out that I was a big player in redesigning our model and comp plan years before in 2009 when it came back to the SDR team. And I was teaching SAP how to redesign their model structure, comp plan, incentives, et cetera. So when it comes down to what my experience was, it was nothing but great experience. Even years later, I teach people that were on the inside sales development team at SAP that I've run across, their paths cross, and they're like, "You were that guy? You're the guy that helped us redesign? Oh my God, thank you so much." And I'm like, I sat in a conference room for 8 hours a day.
I did what I do.
I took conversations. I didn't even know it was going to go anywhere. So I'm glad it worked out. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a huge advantage when you can see what it looks like at scale and then work for smaller companies. I think you bring a lot of insight that way. And I'm sure that's probably what's played out in your career, right? What you saw at SAP, well, I think you left, it looks like 2013. So it's been 10 years, but there's still a major thumbprint on your management style based on what you learned there. Is it fair to say that?
100%. We were aligned to the sales operations, or today they call it revenue operations department, rolling up to the chief operations officer. Amazing human being, and he's still kind of set the bar as far as the kind of operations professional that I always love to work with, or even maybe one day I'm lucky enough to work with him again. So I grew up in a very analytical and kind of just data oriented kind of world. That was my
Right.
experience,
Right.
especially when I got into leadership. I had to learn what the ratios were between, what good looks like and what great looks like, or how to, build those invisible levers to push and pull along the way that, sales operations, they're supposed to look at data and not analyze it in a three-dimensional way, however they can. But the good sales ops leaders or RevOps leaders use the data to create the structure to form the question, not necessarily to answer the question in its entirety, because there's always two parts. There's the data and then there's the story. So as my sister, who's an executive in HR, once said, remember, there's your story, there's my story, then there's the truth.
Right.
And that's very true when it comes to BI versus, the real world story. There's always a little bit of an overlap. But that was one of the biggest lessons I learned just being in the throes of it, rolling up through sales operations, which I loved.
Yeah, I think we see that in larger companies more often, but other than that, it's usually sales or marketing most often, right? We're lining up to. So it's cool to hear that inherent to rolling up in that organization, you were exposed to the operational elements at a different level that you probably wouldn't have been if you reported into marketing or into sales. And I think it's sales development is a operationally centric role. It's just the way it operates. There's a heavy tech component to it. And obviously we'll talk about culture and different things as well, but yeah, the process, right? The efficiencies, a lot of that is operationally oriented. So I always think that the leadership has to be pretty operationally sound of an SDR team for that exact reason. And because your RevOps, sales ops teams are usually pretty consumed downstream unless you have like a dedicated sales development operations person. Otherwise, you go to where the revenue is and then you worry about sales development. And because of that, if managers are not, I don't think, able to work with the technology effectively, then the team is hindered.
And I think on it, I totally agree with everything you just said, especially in a couple of examples. One is 2009, we had been kicked off of Salesforce's platform because apparently we kept, grabbing their talent and bringing it over, right?
Of course.
So we got kicked off and we had to go over to Siebel Systems CRM, and I'm like, it's almost better to write it down on paper. No disrespect, but it was just in comparison what we were used to. So I guess Mr. Benioff and our CEO Lars Dahlgaard custom made up, and we're like, sweet, we're back on Salesforce. And they're asking for volunteers of departmental admins. I'm like, I want to do it. And I think that was one of the things that I started recognizing. And I got the advice in the interview years later from a hiring manager. It just didn't work out, but she gave me this amazing piece of advice. Any technology that touches your team, you either want to be an admin of, or you want to get to know it front to back, or you want to be hands-on it with it every single day. Because if you're barking orders or asking things of your team that you've never done, you've never had a team done, or you don't know anybody who's ever done it ever, then you got a real problem.
Right. That's a sure way to have your team disengage from you specifically as a leader, is like, you don't understand the realities of what I'm dealing with in the front line. I have 12 pieces of technology I have to work with every day, and they all have a myriad of features and functionality. And if you can't, pull the strings of the tech like I can, then what are we talking about here? Is it all talk, or are you to show me something?
Right.
Yeah. Well,
and it paid off though. In 2014, I left SuccessFactors SAP and went to a startup in Palo Alto called IASD. Amazing AI technology. But I came in as the sales development leader, reporting up to our chief revenue officer, and there was no RevOps, there was no sales ops person. And I'm like, I can do it.
See, exactly.
Yeah. So I was kind of and the interesting thing is, and the last thing I'll say about the crossover with sales ops versus marketing or sales, is that sales development and sales operations or revenue operations is very similar. They're kind of like the bridge between marketing and sales. So one could argue in a sales development team has equal say of reporting to marketing, equal say to sales ops, and equal say to sales. So it's I get the question all the time. I know you and I've talked about it, but for me, I think because we are the bridge, I love rolling up through sales operations. Love it. No disrespect to sales and marketing, but that's kind of, it's definitely empowered me a lot more rolling up through sales operations over the years versus sales or marketing. So.
Well, there's definitely some lessons there strategically. If I'm in a strategy role for an organization, thinking about that alignment and having sales development report into operations, I think there's definitely a value piece there. But for the SDR managers or the aspiring SDR managers, embrace the technology full heartedly, right? I think
Yeah,
it really makes a
yeah,
difference in your career. And look where you are, right? So I mean that made a big difference for you. So I'm sure it can help other people. And that's similar story here. Early on, embraced it, got certified in Salesforce, became a RevOps leader. I mean, it segues from there. There's a lot. Not to say the tech is going to be the end all be all by any stretch. So we'll switch topics, but a definitely important point to call out.
yeah. It's good idea to be familiar with it. You don't have to be an expert, but I'm also, I was an SDR back in the dark ages where we didn't have automation. We had a CRM, and I had
Yeah.
a Word document I would copy paste email templates into, right?
Right.
And if I got it logged into Salesforce, I was lucky. So I had to pick up the phone and actually physically dial buttons
What?
back in the day. I know.
Did you have a
Like,
rotary phone? Just kidding.
you know what? No, I've never owned a rotary phone in my entire life.
We did. As a kid growing with grandma, at grandma's house, she had a rotary phone.
Oh, that's
Uh,
fun.
yeah. Well, talking about that technology, you mentioned AI, and I wanted to ask you this. So you went to an AI company in 2013, 2014. So your early exposure to AI, and I know it's big data analytics, but there was an AI component to the organization. So
Yeah.
talking about AI and talking about technology and sales development, let's talk about those two topics in one. What are your thoughts on AI in sales development today and what you're seeing?
I think AI is a great feature. I think it's a trampoline. I think it's a crutch. I think it's a hand to hold for new hires as they ramp. Is it a replacement? Is it the holy grail? Is it going to replace sales development reps? Absolutely not. Especially in the mid-market enterprise space. Mid SMB, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really leaned in on the thought of AI and companies like ChatGPT possibly replacing the SDR function. But the one thing that I thought of, and it backed up on the podcast I was listening to not too far back, is that the people who are most scared of AI and Chat GPT are not sales professionals, marketing professionals, et cetera. It's the reporters who are reporting on them because they can be replaced by having these AI bots completely rewrite articles or put
Mm,
something together for them.
right,
I mean,
right.
even then, there's holes in that. Like, for instance, example, and I hate not to be disrespectful to either university, but Michigan State University, one of my favorite Michigan schools, my top
Right.
two favorite Michigan schools.
Right. I see that on your
Um,
profile.
yeah, they had a shooting, right? A really
Mm,
tragic occurrence in the history of the university, and even University of Michigan was playing them basketball at University of Michigan. We all were. I wish the student body was wearing Michigan State strong or Sparty strong and stuff. Super like in-state support. But Vanderbilt University sent them a message of condolences, but they used Chat GPT and they
wow.
got caught.
Oh,
And then they had to write another message apologizing for the insensitivity of sending a message that clearly was not written by a human being. So and
it was
again,
as
no
a factor
disrespect.
of being insincere. Is that
Yeah, it's taking the easy way out through technology, and
okay?
technology is never ever the answer.
Hmm.
Like you and I have talked about the fact that I think that the average SDR hides behind technology way too much. The
Hmm.
automation, the text, whatever it may be, and then they just hit a button and they move on to the next task. I had the state of Michigan as my territory in 2009. 44% of the businesses in the state of Michigan at the time were tied to the automotive industry, and every single one of those companies was going out of business. How the heck am I going to hide behind an email
Yeah.
to convince these people, like, hi, I know you're going out of business, and you just laid off 17,000 people, but like, you call, you create a relationship. And I make the joke, but it's a little bit of truth behind it with my team. Marriages don't happen, laws aren't passed, new true friendships, anything good in life did not start through an app, a chat, or anything to do with
Email
any
or
AI.
anything. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Right,
Yep.
right. I mean, like, I got married in person. my wife had to go to the legal place to get her name changed after we got married in person. She couldn't do it online, right?
But that can change, right?
So
Like, I mean, you can get married in virtual reality.
I guess,
I mean, a law would have to be passed or something, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know if it's legal yet, but just thinking
but
forward here, yeah.
the way I see it is that now in a legal hearing, photographs cannot be used as evidence because they're so highly manipulable. That's the
Yeah,
right word.
right. Yeah, yeah.
You can't use it.
Yep.
So if that
Deep
is kind
fakes.
of a precursor, yeah, if that's kind of a precursor of where we're going, that AI is going to be a great solution to learn how to write an email,
Okay.
or a great way of putting. I was an art major. I can communicate, but I communicate in small words. I get in front of a technical audience, I'm like, I don't know your big words, sorry.
Oh,
But
yeah. I mean,
in
sometimes
those,
they appreciate it, simplifying complex stuff, though.
exactly.
Mhm.
But I think AI is going to be a support thing
Okay.
always.
Okay. So always enabling people, not enabling itself.
Correct.
Okay. That's interesting.
And,
I
and people
slightly
should not
disagree.
lean too heavily on it. It's fair,
No, no, no. But the thing that I want to unpack is you mentioned, I've had this conversation with other guests, is that it won't replace SDRs. So fully, right? Like you don't need human SDRs because we have all this tech running. We have automation that can pull contact data, create records, create sequences, write the copy. If conversational intelligence got to a good point, make calls, right? Like that fully auto thing. Yeah, we're not there. But don't you think that if I have the right AI tools going, that I could have less SDRs and have more output?
I'm going to answer the question yes and no.
Okay.
So for the SMB space, where it's highly transactional, it's all about numbers, it's about leads, it's about signups, it's about freemium, whatever you,
Right.
100%. AI, you can lean on that heavily to filter out the junk because there's so much coming in. Using people hours to filter that, when an AI can filter that for you,
Right.
totally.
Okay.
Wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, it's making life that much more, I don't want to say easy,
Efficient
but
and
more,
productive. Yeah.
streamlined, efficient, productive. You get into the enterprise space, people who are in the enterprise space can see through that. People who are in the enterprise space, you don't get those numbers of inbound leads. You don't get that, the influx that just drowning from a fire hose. So you have to have somebody manning the helm or personing the helm, to be fair, to make sure that when those leads come in, or when those moments where you have the chat GPT or whatever it is for SMB, or AI for the SMB, it needs to take a human pause, right? They could put in an email address that isn't actually the corporate address, or they could have a secondary address, or they can come in as james.barton@gmail.com, but I can fill in my company name as like Facebook, right?
Yeah.
So,
You're talking about lead validation at this point, right? Yeah.
But it's just the human inquisitiveness, I guess that's the real word too, of a human being understanding. It's like what we learned in Ted Lasso in season 1: be curious, not judgmental. Don't jump to the conclusion that what you have in front of you is gold or pure. And like I was at last company, an incredibly valuable lead came in. The problem was they signed up with their personal email address. So the AI within our filters filtered it out, and it never got to an SDR. Thank goodness I was just
Gmail.
like,
Yeah.
Right. Thank goodness I was going through all the leads. I'm like, that's Facebook. Holy crap.
We have the personal email address to this decision maker here.
Right. So that is like the golden kind of ticket. If you can get the personal email address, the mobile phone number, and it's a big high profile account.
Fair.
I don't think AI either today, I don't know if it's going to happen eventually, but it is the human element that is still so important in those more strategic and high value scenarios that I don't think AI will ever replace.
Yeah, Dan Rude referred to it as human agency. So I've been borrowing that in these discussions a lot, is that it still needs the human agency to sort of orchestrate its use case, as opposed to it dictating its own behavior. We still need to be governing. And I think at a macro level, if you zoom all the way out and look at AI across the globe, that's where regulation needs to step in as well, if we're talking that
Totally.
standpoint, right? So it is a
Totally.
scary
But
thing, though, if you think about, what it could do. It has the ability to evolve on itself, right, in certain learning models, and it's the only
yeah,
technology ever that can do that. The phone, the TV, fire, none of these technologies, all of them were enabling the person, and now we have technology that's like enabling itself or has that ability to. Now the stuff we're
yeah,
seeing on like writing better emails and calls, this stuff is vanilla compared to
right.
that advanced stuff that you're saying. I'm geeking out here, I watch a lot of YouTube videos and whatnot, but yeah, I mean, I think we're watching, your child will see a whole new landscape, right?
Yeah, she'll not know what a CD or a DVD or a Blu-ray is. She won't know what a VHS cassette is. All that fun.
Come on now, what a record.
But yeah, I mean, if you first off, if you have Dr. Dre the Chronic on LP, first
Yes,
off,
sir.
you win.
All
You win. Second off,
right.
like they're coming, they came back. So the dead technology can come back to life, can
Right.
be reintroduced to the world. So
Hmm. No
I
new
I
thing under
don't
the
I don't
sun. I like that. Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I don't think tapes and Betamax is going to come back anytime soon, but there's still possibilities,
Yeah,
right?
frame relay, cloud computing, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
went full circle. Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
yeah, yeah.
All right, let's move on. I know we're short in time, and the hours are clicking away, and due time is literally hours away at this point, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think I've got
um,
30 hours left of freedom.
literally,
Literally
literally,
30 hours.
yeah. Quick trip to Vegas. Um, all right, so we talked about your success story about having the worst, and I think we failed to mention that time when you had the Detroit territory, Michigan territory at SAP, that was the worst territory in the company, and you
Yep.
were the number one SDR in the company,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And the lesson that we took away from there was personalizing your approach, making it about them, not calling up, talking about
Mhm.
yourself, and
Mhm.
actually calling people, getting in touch, having human to human engagement, and
Yeah.
caring about the person on the other phone enough to you can put business aside, build the rapport, and these sorts of things. So it was a very personal approach that you took, and it obviously paid huge dividends for your success there. And your AE was the number one rep in the company as well at the same time too, right?
Yeah, it was people thought I was nuts. I even had a job offer on the table from the same company to go back into a sales role for the West Coast sales team. And I'm like, I think there's something here. And the RVP's like, you're nuts, dude. All right, I don't see it, but good luck. Um, but I mean, it all whittles down to all the states also surrounding Michigan. I had as a territory too, different sales
Mm,
reps.
okay.
But Michigan was the biggest lesson that spread into those
The Great
other
Lakes
territories.
territory. Hmm.
Yeah, basically.
Hmm.
Having a dad from the Midwest, having gone to school in the Midwest, I feel like I get the
It was your
people. I'm cut from
backyard.
a similar cloth. Yeah.
Hmm.
And it hit home in this example where I called the head of HR, because that's the biggest, key role target persona we went after. And this woman answered the phone and I could hear that she was crying. And I was like, did I caught you at a bad time? And she just barfed all these sob amazingly horribly sad stories about what she'd been doing in the past few weeks and laying
Oh
people
wow.
off and getting prepared for it. I caught her like moments after she got done notifying 17,000 people that they were being laid off.
Mm, wow.
And we just talked for like 40 minutes. I think 40 minutes, something like that. And I realized that just sometimes you just need to shut up and listen and be a human.
Be human. All
And
right.
and it also taught me a great lesson too. And she's like, wait, hold on, who are you? Where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm calling from SuccessFactors. She's like, this is a cold call. I'm like, technically it's a cold call, but I'm not in sales. And she goes, you're not? I'm like, no, I don't want your money. And she goes, huh? I'm like, I make money off my company, not you. She goes, okay.
Oh, that's
So I
slick.
kind of
Okay.
spun it in a way where
Mhm.
I'm like, hey, if I could take 15 minutes of your time and show you how you would never have to have this experience you just went through ever again, would it be worth it? And she goes, oh, hell yeah. Set up the meeting, deal went rolling, the sales rep closed it. But it got to the point, and I don't really tell this part of the story very often, is that especially in Michigan and the Detroit area, I would get my relationships to the point with my prospects that my sales rep would show up on site in Detroit. Bear in mind, I'm in the Bay Area, in San Francisco area. And they would always ask my sales rep, "Where's James?"
That's what's up.
But
Yeah. That's the kind of impression you were leaving on people.
Right. That was my goal. I was part of the team. I was not just some snot-nosed punk, you're the SDR, make some calls.
Yeah.
I was like, I set the table. I opened the door. I led my reps to the doorstep. And for me, people don't take a second and actually realize buying something, let alone letting a vendor in the front door, is an emotional moment for a buyer.
Yeah, they're putting a lot on the line when they do that.
Never changed. Yeah, sticking the neck in the line. They're trying to, especially HR. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but HR has never produced a single dollar of revenue in the history of mankind. So why the heck would they stick their neck out to buy something they don't know how to buy? They don't know how to ask for budget, and they don't know how to create a use case or a return on investment scenario to present to their executive leadership. And we're like, we'll do it for you. And this woman goes, "You're going to do all that for us?" Yeah, we'll do it. So it's partnering, it's trust, it's the emotional side of things that AI can't offer. It's the relationship, it is the handshake agreement, it is the let me buy you some pancakes. You're like, pancakes? Okay.
How'd you know?
Because of exactly, but because of that, my sales rep was the pancake guy. Right?
Okay.
His customers loved going and getting pancakes with him.
Well, one thing that you mentioned in our offline discussions as well is that relationship between SDR and AE as well. So I'm sure you teach your teams a lot about investing into that relationship. Talk about what that looks like, what ideal looks like, utopia between AE and SDR.
So the SDR, you don't really need to educate them on that aspect very much.
You don't think so?
Because not as much as the sales rep.
Oh, true. Okay.
Especially in the enterprise space.
Okay.
The sales development rep, we're here, especially the fresh new hires. They're like, "Let's go, let's do this. What can I do? How can I align? What can I do for you?" Blah, blah, blah. They're full of energy and Red Bull, right? But the sales reps, especially in the enterprise space, have been burned so many times by really crappy SDRs. Like my current company, for instance, they had a really bad experience pre me, and I'm not saying I solved everything, but they got burned. So they were so self-dependent. They didn't rely upon anybody else. So I'd say like 75% of the education of how an SDR and AE work together most successfully has been oriented towards the sales reps at my company. I have one-on-ones with almost every sales rep globally every month. It's a lot of time, but it's worth it because it's creating and healing these wounds. Excuse me, but it's got to the point where SDRs are now being invited to present at global QBRs. Like nobody wants to hear from the old ball guy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I make the analogy, make analogies a lot, but it's not a Batman or Robin. It's a Han Solo Chewbacca. They are partners. There's no sidekick. Right. One just doesn't speak English. But
the younger crowd, you might have to explain that one a little bit, but I got you.
Right. But the point is that, if you're going into the scenario where your sales rep and your SDR are partners, they're attacking accounts, they're strategizing, you got your foot in the front door, and the sales reps recognize that the real power of an SDR is after they get the foot in the front door. And then they're like, all right, I need all the relationships connected to this
all other stakeholders. I need secondary meetings. Go. Right.
Because sales development was created to create relationships that the sales rep couldn't find otherwise, and then focus these sales reps on closing deals.
I think we're going to clip that. That was a bar for sure. Yeah, the relationship piece of it, and you think more holistically. We had another guest from Zoom Info on Zach Thompson. He's a director of sales development, and he talks about a different way of looking at sales development, and it's not just new acquisition as well, right? There's expansion, there's renewal, there are other motions where you can deploy sales development. But the point of the matter is, it still all comes back to relationships that salespeople probably wouldn't be able to get to and build on their own because they're focused downstream on closing.
Exactly. But I mean, sales development, I think, is the art form within the art form of sales. Like it is creating something that is organic. And I learned my dad kept trying to force this relationship with me and his wife for years and years and years, and we never got along that great. I mean, we didn't hate each other, but we were like, hey, what's up? Hey,
Yeah.
good to see you. But the moment he
No
backed
sparks
off,
flew. Got it.
right.
Hmm.
But the moment he backed off, we would chat for hours and hours and hours. And now my stepmom is this great friend of mine. Like
Hmm.
she did not want to replace my mom, which she said early on. And she's just become like the moment you pull away and just give some freedom to the relationship to grow organically, that's where the real art form is. And that's how at sales development, if you let them spread their wings, they can be pretty surprising of how amazing they can be.
We'll talk about the culture that you establish in your teams. I think that's an important area that we want to unpack here. You have a lot of viewpoints on this. One of it being that culture is the bedrock of sales development teams. And one of the lines that I'm stealing and will continue to steal from our offline discussion is culture cannot be created by leaders. Leaders can create the framework of culture, but ultimately it's the people they hire to fill into those frameworks that create, drive, and uphold and defend the culture.
Yeah.
That's a straight Bible verse right there, man. That's definitely going in the books. So unpack that for me. What does that mean to you when culture cannot be created by leaders?
So first stop in tech at SuccessFactors, culture was everything. Culture was first. We had a lot of one-liners that I still align to today. Is the number one rule, no asshole rule. And
Yep.
it's funny enough, I brought that into my personal life as well. I eliminated the people who kind of were asshole.
Yeah. Number
Like,
one rule on this show, no assholes
no asshole.
allowed. Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
there's other things like which hit home, and I use it as a real world example. Our CEO Lars Dahlgaard, used sayings like extra 10 push-ups. You put an extra 10 push-ups in every day, you end up having over 3,000 extra push-ups every year.
Mm.
And when my mom got sick, she had brain cancer, and we had about 12 weeks before she passed away. I put in an extra couple days or in a couple extra hours with her because it all added up. And when the sorrow and the sadness kind of started to subside, I realized that I have no regrets. There was never I could have done more. I should have spent more time with her. It was true. It's a value and a lesson that I learned from work. And then the last term, which I think is the most famous, besides the no asshole rule, and Thomas Keller kind of has the famous chef has a different version of it, but it was made famous by Toyota called Kaizen, or just constant improvement. Or if you're better than yesterday, it's not as good as you will build tomorrow. And Thomas Keller says just a little bit better than yesterday.
Right.
Right.
1% better every
too.
day. Compounded effects. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you breed that into the teams, that mindset of always just trying to get a little bit better every day.
It's a little bit better every day. It's communicating. There are no silos in a business. As far as I'm concerned, like my org chart is upside down. Like it's not me down, it's me up, right? So if I can empower and support the team to have relationships with one another, their sales reps, but also go to the marketing counterparts, the revenue operations counterparts, even our executive leadership, that in itself creates an even deeper element of culture. I mean, I have gone into sales development teams and the culture is about as deep as a bathtub. But the moment you empower, you give freedom, you educate, you bring in third parties. Like I started doing this thing this year before going on parental leave of having guest stars, but not just internal guest stars. Like a buddy back from my SuccessFactors days worked for a venture capital firm as their kind of CISO in residence. And he joined the team. It was supposed to be for 20 minutes, ended up being an hour and 20 minutes.
Nice. Okay. Yeah.
And they're getting firsthand education from somebody who has no tie to us. I sent him a couple bottles of wine, right? Like to say thank you. Like a buddy was doing another buddy a favor.
Right.
But it's those kind of things. It's offering up something.
The team saw you investing to them and bridging that gap and going outside to bring in new insights.
And one thing I didn't tell you when we connected offline, we had a riff this past November.
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking, especially because I unfortunately lost a SDR manager for the Americas who I adore. I've worked with for a couple companies. He's still one of my favorite people. And unfortunately, I think it kind of soured our relationship. I know it'll get better eventually. But I get onto the team call soon after that took place, and I was crying in front of my team. And the whole thing, meeting, blah, 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 and then I connected with all of them one-on-one, and I apologized for losing my cool and not being professional. And every single one of them had a very similar response. It's just like, James, you pour so much of your heart and soul into this team and this culture. We'd be surprised if you didn't cry.
Right. You genuinely have a give a shit factor. That's what John Burroughs
Right.
calls it, the give a shit factor.
Right. And one of the things was interesting back, they didn't do it after a while, but SuccessFactors, when you first joined the company back when I did, you get a copy of this book. I forget the name of the title, but it was about Southwest Airlines. Much before what happened recently over the holidays, blah, blah, blah. But the whole thing started with culture. You empower, you lift up, you encourage, you motivate the individual before the team or the business. And each individual will bring that positivity, their own personal culture, back to their job, back to their day-to-day, back to the group they're immediately working with. And that spreads out beyond the borders of their team and department. So I firmly believe the individual comes first before the company.
People
and
before
that started
profits.
with SuccessFactors. People before anything, because no matter what, every company's in the people business.
Right, I agree.
And as Michael Scott likes to say, I invest in people because people don't go out of business.
All right. Well, I mean, working for you, I'm sure, has got to be a very beneficial experience, right? Like this, like working at SuccessFactors, you learned a ton, and you brought that with you and helped you advance your career. Working under your leadership and you in a culture like yours, I could only imagine if I was one of those reps that I'm learning a lot of new things that I probably couldn't learn in a lot of different ways, just because it's by way of experience. Like the line you use, you can't buy experience, right? So, but though, look internally, what do you think it's like working for you? Like, why do you think reps, outside of you investing in them, teaching them new things, why do reps aspire to work with James?
It's always a tough question to even think about, let alone try to answer. I think that the three things that come to mind, at least I try to give this to anybody I'm teammates with.
Right.
You know, they don't report to me, I'm their teammate, right? I work for them. One is freedom. The moment you put, you must make this many phone calls or this many emails must be sent one day, I'm going to run away from that team. That is not how you're successful. So here's all the rope. Go. Raise your hand and come find me if you need help, or if you want to strategize, we can work together on things. But again, I am your teammate. I am not your boss. I'm not directing you to do things. The expectations are hit your quota. That's it.
Okay.
And when everything before that is all semantics. So sales development reps, when they first start getting used to that, they're like, really? Think about it.
There's so much I want to unpack there. Yeah.
Right. My sales leadership counterparts, do you think they tell their sales reps how to close deals? No, they're just like, close your deals, update your forecast. You know, if you need help, raise your hand. So it's kind of similar from bringing that experience of 2008 when I was a sales rep back to the sales development role. I mean, I'm asking for forecasts, like verbal commits for the targets for the month as well. So it has that emotional, psychological tie, like, oh, I committed to this, I got to hit that. But no, I think the biggest thing is freedom. And, you know, I don't get into the metrics of like phone and email until there's a problem or there's a struggle.
You work backwards,
let's look at this.
It sounds like, yeah.
Right. It's sales development as a function is a revenue predictability engine. And going back to the tie to sales operations, I figured if you figure out what those ratios are to lead you to success and factor in seasonality or whatever, it can really be a lot more simple. So create the freedom, you know, go shoot yourself in the foot a few times. Just don't do it twice. My grandfather once told me there's nothing wrong with failing. Don't make a habit of it. But the point is like, you give them freedom, it invests in themselves. I think the second thing is investing in them, not only from technologies and, you know, guest stars and my time. And my time is just there to support them, but also to, you know, block and tackle a lot of stuff coming at us, but also invest in them personally. Yeah, I've had a lot of leaders don't know a thing about me, and I don't ever care about working for them ever again, because the investment in them personally shows the investment whole hog, if you want to use the, you know, the Texas terms.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one.
they feel that much more empowered, that
Yep.
much more motivated, that much more likely to hop out of bed on a Monday morning at 6, 7, 8 a.m. to
Yeah,
hit the
there's
ground
someone there
running.
that actually gives a shit about who me as an individual, right? It's
Right.
completely different when you walk in on a Monday morning and your manager, instead of saying how was your weekend, they say something like, how was your kid's birthday party? I mean,
Right.
it's just because they're in tune enough to know that that was taking place, and it
Right.
doesn't take a whole lot of effort to get tuned in like that. But to your point earlier, people before everything, and if you can get to that level of dynamic with your people, at least, I mean, it won't work with everyone, but with a large percentage of people, I think you can. I think people are open to it, want that. I don't know,
Yeah.
but for me, the leaders that took that level of interest in me are the ones that I ran through the walls for. Right. And
Yeah.
it's just, you got the most out of me because you cared about me. Right.
Yeah.
So
So one last story about this, then I'll get to the final point. Is um, there was a guy that started about a month before me at SuccessFactors 2006. His name is Roger Zacapa. Still a great friend today. He was
hey,
my
hey
number one
Roger.
competitor. Roger's an amazing human being. He's still a great friend. Like, I randomly ran into him at a SDR leadership dinner not too far back.
Hmm.
And he was the inbound guy. I was the outbound guy, same territory. And I kicked his ass every day, every
Wow.
month.
Okay.
So year and a half goes by. I go into the sales route, the closing route. He goes in the sales development leadership route. He becomes a manager. End of 2008, I got laid off, rehired, demoted, given a raise, told to go on vacation for a few weeks, come back as an SDR, got Michigan as my territory, and Roger was my boss. So
Oh.
I'm like, this is great, but I'm so sorry to lay off your team. He goes, yeah, I just laid off half my team, but I get you. And I'm like, no pressure, jerk.
Yeah.
Few months later, I snapped my right Achilles tendon, so I couldn't leave the
Oh,
house.
that's
Right,
painful.
foot up, couldn't leave the house, couldn't
How?
drive, the whole
Basketball,
nine
like
yards.
biking?
Playing basketball.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The ironic part is 53 weeks later, I went back and snapped the other one, doing the same thing.
Dude. Oh,
Yeah, don't ask. We can talk about that later. But
yeah.
point is,
Wow.
about a week after I was stuck at home, who shows up at my front door after driving an hour and a half with a burrito? Because he knows I love these burritos in San Mateo. And he's like, by the way, here and him this card, and the card was signed by everybody in the team. And it was
And
just that it was like
that's leadership,
that,
people.
but that's also culture, and that's the culture that he was upholding and supporting and defending. And I use the word defend because
Right.
everybody who's part of that culture is equally responsible defending that culture.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that Roger's still an
Great
amazing guy.
story.
So if he's watching that, hey Roger,
Hey,
love you.
Raj. All right,
The last thing
James.
is, and I'll say, just
Yeah.
teach them what they can't buy, or teach them what they can't read.
Ooh.
It's the real life
You can't find it
experiences that
on, you
I've
can't
had.
find this on LinkedIn, people. Yeah.
Nope, no, it's
Like these stories
analogies.
you're
It's
telling, these are at the end of the day, real life anecdotal stuff that has happened. And we've
yeah.
have real lessons that we've taken away.
Yeah, I mean, I won't tell any stories because I know we're running out of time, but it's the stories of when I got out of the ocean just in time to not meet a tiger shark. It was a lesson that I bake into a lot of things I tell my team. It's lessons that I learned at art school. People are like, yeah, whatever, you have a fine arts degree. I'm like, yeah, you go to art school and not feel like crying 7 days a week after having your heart ripped out. It's a lot of lessons that I've learned that I can relay back to my team, that they're like, oh shit, James has been through the ringer. Oh shit, this is the kind of stuff to avoid. Oh, that's a great idea, to lean in on the relationship side of what I do and bring that back to the team and share it, not just keep it in a little box in a silo for my own use, right? So
Advice that's
anyways, that's kind
substantiated
of
by
the
real stuff. Yeah, this is, yeah, and not everybody, you know, I don't think everybody appreciates that all the time. If it doesn't come to them packaged a certain way, like a social media post or a video on YouTube, they don't give it a lot of merit sometimes. Like, well, you don't have 100,000 followers. Why would I listen to you? But the reality is, like, these gems that you're talking about are, people can avoid a lot of heartache and struggle by just heeding some real life advice. I mean, we sound like some old dogs right now, but it's, we're trying to
I
pass it down and give it back.
I hate to say it, but old school is the right school. It's not the
Woo.
best school, it's the right school. Think about it, like phone call, old school. Sending handwritten letters, old school. Sending direct mail, which I read an article last night about like the upturn of sending stuff, because I hate
Gifting.
to say it, but
Mhm.
everybody loves free shit. You know, you ever go to a Warriors game and watch the t-shirt cannon?
Hell yeah.
People freak out. It's the most uncomfortable t-shirt ever, and it's double XL. And
But
it's
people
like,
are jumping over themselves again.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You could have it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Cool, man. And
it's
another one is
a lot of stuff.
the showing up at your people's doorstep with the burrito. Like that's a gem right there. Because
Yeah.
that will it's all these years later, it still leaves a mark, right? So
Yeah.
all right, man. Well, you have a baby due tomorrow, so go prepare, go be with your wife. Thank you for being with us and spending this time and dropping wisdom right now. Thank you for sharing the story too about mom and everything. I think a lot of, to the point of putting people before profits and people before everything, that's kind of the idea there. Is I really want to know James Barton as a person holistically. The sales advice, the strategies, the tactics are all good. Everybody take those, run with them, implement in your business. Look up James as well, and follow him. I believe on LinkedIn. Where do you want people to go to check you out?
Yeah, best place to find is LinkedIn. I'm pretty much on it every day. So if you send me an email or message, I'll be happy to respond. But yeah, I mean, I pretty much accept all connection requests. So by all means.